They said she refused a marriage arranged by a lord who believed her silence meant obedience. Her name was Iliane, young, educated, and daring enough to imagine a life chosen by her own hands. But on the morning they dragged her into the courtyard, it wasn't her defiance they feared. It was her influence. One woman standing upright could inspire 10 more. And so they prepared the wheel. The crowd gathered long before sunrise, drawn by the metallic clink of chains swaying in the cold air. That sound, soft, steady, impossible to ignore, traveled across the square like a warning. Every woman who heard it knew exactly what it meant. The wheel was coming, and once it arrived, there would be no turning back. Elaine was tied down, wrists pulled tight, ankles threaded with rope that bit into skin. But her eyes remained steady. That unsettled the magistrates far more than any accusation she denied. They expected begging. They expected collapse. Instead, they faced a silence sharper than steel. Because here is the paradox that rulers throughout history hated most. When a woman refuses to break, they build a machine to break her for them. Today we are opening the record on one of the most feared of those machines, the Catherine wheel. Not as a medieval legend, not as a lurid curiosity, but as a weapon of systemic control engineered to turn living bodies into public warnings. In this expose, we unravel 3 truths: how the wheel really worked, why women were most often chosen for it, and how entire kingdoms used its terror to crush rebellion before it could breathe. And beneath it all, listen closely. The chains are still moving.
The chains sway again, soft metal tapping against wood, marking a rhythm older than any kingdom. That sound carries us into the heart of the device itself. The Catherine wheel wasn't just a torture instrument, it was a theater of obedience. A massive wooden disc, hoisted upright, reinforced with iron bands. And at its center, a single truth. Pain was never the goal. Spectacle was. The wheel had to be large enough to be seen from the edge of a crowd, slow enough that every turn could be savored, and unforgiving enough that bones would not merely break, they would betray the natural shape of the human body. Iliane was bound across its frame, her limbs stretched along the spokes. But the true horror came from its rotation. As the executioner turned the wheel, the chains whispered through the air again and again, circling her like a slow, deliberate countdown. The spin erased predictability. One moment her ribs faced the sky, the next her legs hung useless beneath her. Every strike landed where no one could prepare for it, because unpredictability is terror's favorite weapon. With each blow of the iron rod, bones snapped at obscene angles, arms bending backward, fingers crushed into the wood, legs twisting until joints dislocated with a wet, irreversible pop. Not fast, never fast. The wheel demanded time, wanted the onlookers to absorb every detail, wanted the women in the crowd to understand the message carved behind every fracture. Resist, and this will be your shape. This was how rulers maintained order, not through law, not through faith, through fear sculpted in plain sight. And if you're drawn to uncovering the machinery behind history's darkest systems, the silent tools of control that shaped entire societies, then stay with us. These stories matter. And if you haven't yet, consider subscribing to support the work of bringing them into the light. But for now, focus on that sound once more, the chains tapping wood, as Iliane slips into the next stage of her suffering.
The chains trembled softly, barely audible beneath the murmurs of the crowd,
Yet that faint metallic tapping held more truth than the magistrates ever admitted. Because once the wheel stopped spinning, the real purpose of the punishment began. Ilion hung in a shape no body was meant to hold, limbs twisted, breath shallow, eyes flickering between pain and something far more dangerous to the men who condemned her: clarity. She was still conscious, still witnessing them, still defying them simply by being alive. Historically, this moment terrified authorities the most. They wanted a corpse, not a martyr. But the wheel had a cruel gift. It often refused to kill quickly. Many women survived the breaking, lingering for hours, even days. And when that happened, the judges ordered the final, calculated humiliation, raising the victim on a pole. So, the executioner threaded new ropes through the spokes. The chains chimed again. The wheel, with Ilion still bound to it, was hoisted upright like a grotesque monument. Suspended above the crowd, she became a forced spectacle, a living statue sculpted by power. This wasn't punishment, it was politics. Traveling magistrates recorded how townspeople were required to walk past these raised wheels on their way to market, to church, to work. Some were ordered to kneel, others were told to recite oaths renouncing rebellion. The broken woman overhead was a constant reminder, an accusation, a warning, a prophecy. But here lies the unpredictable shock that history rarely mentions. Sometimes the wheel failed to accomplish what the rulers intended. There are documented cases where the crowd shifted from witness to accomplice, not of execution, but resistance. Whispers would spread, "She didn't deserve this." Mothers would look at their daughters and feel a tremor of recognition. Some villagers would slip water or crumbs of bread into reach. Others would mutter prayers not sanctioned by the church. And although the authorities tried to drown out these quiet rebellions, they could never silence the chains, because every breeze sent that sound drifting across rooftops, a reminder that cruelty was not divine judgment, it was human choice. And choices can be challenged. As night fell over Ilion's village, the wheel creaked, the chains tapped, and the crowd below held its breath for what would come next.
The night air settled around the village, cool, heavy, carrying the soft metallic tapping of the chains as the wheel swayed in the wind. That quiet rhythm outlasted the soldiers, the crowd, even the magistrates who ordered the sentence. And in that stillness, something remarkable always happened. People began to think. Because cruelty has an echo. It doesn't vanish when the crowd disperses. It lingers, clinging to the edges of memory. And for the women who lived under rulers eager to display bodies as warnings, that echo reshaped entire generations. Mothers told daughters to walk quietly, to avoid attention, to choose silence over survival. Men learned that obedience secured safety, while dissent demanded sacrifice. The wheel didn't just break bodies, it rearranged society. Yet history also records a second echo, softer but stubborn. One carried through whispered stories, secret prayers, and hidden acts of defiance. Some families risked fines or imprisonment to bury victims in unmarked graves rather than leave them displayed. Certain villages outlawed the wheel entirely, refusing to let their square become a theater of domination. And in rare moments, entire communities turned their backs during an execution, robbing authorities of the audience they craved most. It's easy to dismiss these gestures as small, but history turns on small things. A refusal to watch, a hand that reaches out with water, a voice that names cruelty for what it is. The Catherine wheel survives today in art, in saintly legends, in fragments of court records. But the real legacy is psychological, the reminder that fear can be engineered, sharpened, polished into a tool, and that societies often accept the tool long before they question it. Which forces a troubling question. What chains still sway around us today, tapping quietly in the background, normal only because we've grown used to the sound? What systems instruct us to look away, to stay silent, to accept suffering as order? The past offers no comfort, only clarity. And that clarity is why these stories matter. If you believe it's important to confront these shadows, to uncover the machinery of control that shaped entire eras and still whispers to us now, then stay with us. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Not for me, but for the work of dragging these forgotten truths